سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم إلى نور الفهم وأكرمنا من معرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا من الحلم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم بارك لنا في جمعنا هذا. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مباركا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا معنا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من عبادك الراشدين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم اجعل لنا من كل ضيق مخرجا ومن كل هم فرجا. اللهم اجعل لنا من بعد العسر يسرا. دبر لنا فإننا لا نحسن التدبير وقدر لنا فإننا لا نحسن التقدير. بارك اللهم لنا في أعمالنا وفي أرزاقنا وأهلنا وذوينا وأحبابنا. اللهم أصلح حال أمة حبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. فك الكرب عن كل مكروب وفك البلاء عن كل مبتلى من أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. أنت به عليم يا رب العالمين. O Allah, we call upon you, we pray to you, beseech you, we ask you by your names and attributes to guide us and bless us and to make us steadfast upon the right path. O Allah, fill our hearts with your abundant mercy and fill our homes with your abundant mercy. O Allah, help us navigate through every trial and difficulty in our lives and bless our lives and our livelihood and our family and our arzaq and our progeny. We ask you, O Allah, by your names and attributes, to guide us to the right path and to make us steadfast upon it. And we ask you to facilitate for us our affairs. O Allah, facilitate for us our affairs. Make the best of our actions the last of our actions, the best of our days the last of our days, and the best of all days the day we meet you and you're pleased with us. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ameen, ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd, I pray that you're all doing well. Jazakumullah khair for your attendance for our Friday forum tonight. And the subject is about the Masjid and community growth. We're going to be discussing a lot of different aspects of this, hoping to have it interactive, hoping to hear from you and your feedback and your advice and suggestions, inshallah. But before we get started, I guess I'm going to pass it over to Akhi Ibrahim for some announcements, and then we'll put a framing for the discussion, and we'll start, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, barakallahu feekum for coming tonight. Just really quickly before we get into the announcements, as always, you see the Slido QR code up there with the code on the side, the 4446. You can put in your questions. If you see any questions that you like, relevant to this topic, please. Let's try to stay as close to this topic as we can. Just thumbs up, put them up to the top. We'll go through the ones that are top, most liked, most relevant. We'll go through them, inshallah. In terms of announcements, forgive me if I get the timings wrong, but inshallah tomorrow we have a fundraiser for Al-Manara Institute at 6 p.m. And then Sunday we have a Quran night. And then next Saturday we have the fundraiser for ICPC, also at 6 p.m. inshallah. If you have any more questions about either of those, you can call the office and they can tell you all the details where you can get tickets or join or show up or donate, inshallah. So also, housekeeping, there's snacks on both sides, or there will be snacks, and tea and coffee. And please keep any side conversations outside of the main musalla. Thank you. Tfaddal, Shaykhi.
Jazakallah khair, mashallah, sweet and straight to the point. Allahu Akbar, alhamdulillah. So inshallah we'll start the discussion going about the masjid and about community growth. And I guess this subject's of real critical importance because the masjid is meant to be the centerpiece in our lives. It's meant to be like that. It's a fixture in community. It has been historically. Is it today? If the answer is no, why is that the case? And why is it so important that it is a fixture in the community? Well, I guess the discussion starts best when we take it back to the Prophet ﷺ and his example and his model. When we learn about the Prophet ﷺ and his life, we learn that the companions, for more than half of revelation, did not have the luxury of having a space for worship, a space that belongs to all of them, a space that actually connects them in a community sphere. And that's because during the Meccan period there was a great deal of persecution. In fact, if you know anything about the seerah, You know that Salat al-Jama'ah as a recommended prayer wasn't established until the Meccan period, until the Medinan period. Throughout the Meccan period, there were situations in which a few companions were able to gather for Salah in some of the shi'ab of Mecca, the outskirts of Mecca. But as something that was regularly done, that couldn't happen because they needed to secretly worship. And of course, there were two sides to this. On one end, this great trial that they were in, experiencing persecution, made the group of most committed believers. والسابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه. Allah mentions السابقون الأولون, those who were first and foremost, as having a very, very special status in Iman. And at the foremost of this is the Muhajirin, and then after them the Ansar. But nonetheless, it created a certain sense of commitment. During the Meccan period, there were no hypocrites. The munafiqeen, they only came about during the Medinan period, because who's going to want to be a hypocrite during the Meccan period? They're being tortured, persecuted, their properties are being taken, they're being forced out of their homes. Who would want to be part of that? It became a feature in the Medinan period, the movement of hypocrisy. So that's on one end. But on the other end, if you know anything about the seerah, you know that by the end of the Meccan period, 13 years, the numbers of Muslims were in the dozens. The message didn't really spread that far to this point. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ went to Medina, we learned something very profound that relates to the Masjid. And this is really the center of our discussion here. We need to think about this and think about it critically, because it shows us why the Prophet ﷺ's message was so powerful. It was a message centered on human interaction. People, they didn't go download the Quran on Kindle, go read the book at a library and all of a sudden become a Muslim. That's not what happened. What happened was, they met Muslims, they met the Prophet ﷺ, they fell in love with him or with the believers among the companions, and then they fell into their orbit. Does the same apply to us today? Is it a reverse reality? Is it a reverse reality? Do people meet Muslims and then become Muslim? Or do they study Islam and then become Muslim? Of course, I know there's not one clear answer to this. There's a mixture of both. But interestingly, it was centered on human interaction. And that's why the Masjid was so important. One of the first three things the Prophet ﷺ did was build the Masjid. Everyone here should know those three things were exactly. He focused on the brotherly bond, to start building those connections between people who are strangers to each other, Muhajirin and Ansar. The second thing he did was the Medina Charter. And that was so that everyone knows that there's justice going to be implemented and everyone's going to have their rights protected. The third thing he did was build the Masjid. And the story of them building it is very beautiful. But hey, look, just think about this. The Prophet ﷺ's Masjid was so profound, not because of how it was built. Let that sink in for a moment. The Prophet's Masjid was so special, not because of how it was built. It was a very simple structure, made from basic building materials that they had available to them at the time. But what made it special and its message go beyond the confines of Medina, even beyond the confines of that era, was what happened in that space. And this brings a lot of things to reflect on, and especially when we think about what the Prophet ﷺ told us. Prophet ﷺ told us there's going to be a time where the reality is going to be switched. It's going to be actually quite the opposite. You will find that the Masjid will have a magnificent structure. There will be many masajid. The Prophet ﷺ says this is one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. One of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that people will build amazing structures, and then they'll scarcely actually revive those spaces. يشيدونها ثم لا يعمرونها إلا قليلا. As the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, they will build those masajid. You'll find that those masajid might be able to hold thousands of people, but then you'll find that those spaces aren't very vibrant. They're very lifeless. So, what I'm hoping from this discussion is a few things. I guess this is the end of the framing before we start having the discussion. I hope that you guys are sending your questions here, or your comments, or whatever you'd want. Please send it, to the link. Yeah, inshallah. Send it to Slido. You could just scan this barcode, and people will vote on the comments that are most, or the questions that are most important to them, and that'll be the first thing that we go through. My hope in this discussion is to really understand what the message of the Prophet ﷺ was about, and talk a little bit about this human interaction element in it, and how the masjid is supposed to fill that void, especially in light of the age we live in, with social media, with the virtual reality, with the people becoming more siloed more than ever into their phones and their personal private lives, and some people reducing their connection with the deen to information. I'm going to listen to this YouTube lecture, I'm going to watch this video, I'm going to make sure that I have a motivational speech or a spiritual thing as part of my day-to-day schedule, but then virtually isolated. So my hope is that we'll discuss the role of the masjid in terms of human interaction, and discuss some of the challenges that we're facing at the masjid. Discuss some of the things that perhaps need to be addressed and fixed, and that's where I'm hoping your feedback will infuse this subject with a little bit of practicality, and perhaps talk about ways that we could make this space a better place, inshallah. So that's the framing I have, and I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to put barakah in our discussion. Allahumma ameen.
Ameen. Barakallah feek, Shaykhna. So I only see one question, and everyone's liking it, so that's not going to work. I'm going to need more. But to start the conversation, as we think about more questions and we think about more relevance, we start at the top. What exactly was the purpose of the masjid and establishing the masjid? Beyond just the brotherhood, the sisterhood. Can we start there at the top and then start chiseling our way in deeper?
Yeah, subhanAllah, that's a very good question. When you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, you see that Medina was built around the masjid. Of course it existed before the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. However, it was really the centerpiece. It was the main space of vibrancy in the whole community, where people would come for their moments of happiness and joy. They would come for their moments of sadness. It would be their location that they go to when they end their travel, or when they're beginning their travel. It was the place where the Prophet ﷺ would discuss critical issues relating to the matters of state. He would consult the companions in the space of the masjid. He would receive people who are coming from far distances. There's so many, take a look at this example. We know that Surah Ali Imran, the third surah of the Quran, the first half of it is about the emissaries of Banu Najran. They came to the Prophet ﷺ. Where was he? He was in the masjid. And they came debating with the Prophet, asking him questions. And they stayed in Medina for some time. This event happened in the masjid. Another example is the Prophet ﷺ in the middle of a khutbah, a companion walking in and saying, Ya Rasulullah, mata sa'a? O Prophet of Allah, when's the hour? And the Prophet ﷺ told him, sit down. And then after some time he said, where's the one who asked the question? So the man stood up and he said, مَا أَعْدَدْتَ لَهَا? What have you prepared for it? So the man said, I haven't prepared much beyond loving Allah and His Prophet. The Prophet said, the person will be with whom he loves on the Day of Judgment. That's something that happened in the masjid. The Eid celebration, that's something that happened in the masjid. Of the Prophet ﷺ, or I should say the after celebrations, in the hadith that mentions them rejoicing and playing in the masjid, from the hadith where Sayyidah Aisha was with the Prophet ﷺ and she was looking at the ones who were in the masjid as they were celebrating and singing for Eid. So that's something that happened in the space of the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ would walk in the masjid and he would see hilaq dhikr, circles of remembrance and circles of knowledge. That's something that happened in the masjid. Certain scenes from the seerah we get that they happen in the masjid, like that man who came with a great dilemma, that he was someone who was overwhelmed by his shahwa and his desire. And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, as he was sitting in the middle of the masjid with the companions all around him, Ya Rasulullah, idha li bizina. O Prophet of Allah, give me permission to fornicate. Wal-'iyadhu billah. And the companions went crazy. They were like, how dare you? You're speaking to the Prophet and you're speaking to him in the masjid. So then the Prophet ﷺ brought him closer and he gave him advice. And then in the end of his advice, he put his hand on his heart and he said, Allahumma tahhir qalbah wa hassan farjah wa ghfir dhanbah. Oh Allah, purify his heart and guard his chastity and forgive his sin. That's something that happened in the masjid. When we find certain events from the seerah, like the likes of Sayyidina Khalid ibn al-Walid, or Thumama ibn Athal. These are great individuals, leaders from among the Arabs. Thumama ibn Athal, he was Sayyidu Bani Hanifa. He's the one who he was the chief of Banu Hanifa, who were a tribe in the eastern part of Al-Jazeera. And he came as a prisoner and he was put in the masjid. And then the Prophet ﷺ kept him there for 3 days and he kept on asking him every day, What do you have, O Thumama? And he kept on repeating to the Prophet the same statement. He said, if you kill me, you're going to kill someone who has very high value to his people. They're going to come asking for my blood. But if you forgive me, you're going to forgive, or if you let me go and acquit me, you're going to acquit someone who's very generous. And then the first day, second day, third day passed. The Prophet ﷺ said, Atliku Thumama. Let Thumama go. So then he went out to a nearby garden, he made wudu, and he came back to the Prophet and he said his shahada. And he accepted Islam. It was a place where people came to Islam. Khalid ibn al-Walid, that brilliant military general, after having spent years as an enemy of the Prophet ﷺ, he walked in the masjid one day, in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and announced his Islam and accepted it. And he became Khalid ibn al-Walid. He became Sayfullah al-Maslul. Sayyidina Khalid. And the beauty that revolves around his story and the other companions. The masjid was truly a space where the companions bonded. They lived with each other. They experienced sadness and they experienced happiness. And the saddest of all days in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was the day in which the Prophet passed away. And they brought him to the masjid. You know the story from the seerah. That was the same space where Sayyidina Umar stood and he said, whoever says the Prophet died, I'm going to kill him. He went to meet Allah. He's going to come back. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr stood up and he recited the verses, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. Muhammad's a prophet. Prophets have gone before him. Right? And then when Umar heard this, he fell on his knees and he cried. And they prayed on the Prophet ﷺ in that masjid. And the masjid was so full for his janazah that they needed to pray in groups. When one group would finish, another would come in. The masjid was a very, very, very vibrant space. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feek. So those are some of the functions of the masjid. Very multifaceted in terms of the things the Prophet ﷺ did. And that's why, inshallah we'll get to it more, but that's why this whole notion that the masjid is just supposed to be a place for salah is utterly, utterly backwards and wrong. That's not true. The masjid just being a space for salah, and some people try to reduce the role of the masjid to being just a musalla. Some people get annoyed when the masjid is addressing things beyond the scope of worship. But that has no place. The Prophet ﷺ always spoke about matters of state in the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ had many hats. He was a teacher and a murabbi. He was a mufti who addressed real life situations and conflicts between people. He was also a head of state, and he would address those matters of state in the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ brought all of this to the house of Allah, and that's why our masjid needs to be the lifeline of our community if it's really going to serve its purpose, especially in the West. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek, very well said. So now that we understand a little bit more about how it was the Prophet's time, what it was at the core, how multifaceted it was, more than just a place to pray, more than just a place to worship, a place to govern, a place for the state and for the masjid, a place for people to gather together, brotherhood, sisterhood, all of those things. It was really the home for so many people, more than their own homes. So how do we now bring it here to our masajid, and how do we develop that sense of community?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, I'll tell you this, the Prophet ﷺ, one more thing, before I answer your question. Prophet ﷺ made it a priority to make the shabab and the young people love the masjid. And there's a beautiful example of this, in a group of young men, they were teenagers, coming to be in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ to learn from him. They came from far away, and they stayed in Medina for 20 days. And after those 20 days, the hadith mentions that they became homesick. They were sad. They missed their families. So the Prophet ﷺ sent them back, and he said that the most knowledgeable among you should lead you, and he sent them back as teachers to their families and their people. But it shows that the Prophet ﷺ made it a point to make the masjid beloved to the hearts of young people too. There were young people who, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, they were only teenagers. And these are companions that we know to be of the most knowledgeable. The four Abdullahs. I mentioned them in many talks before, and maybe perhaps many of you have heard this. Let's see who are the four Abdullahs? These are four young companions who, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, they were teenagers, and they were scholars among the companions. You guys, who knows one of them? Raise your hand. One of the four Abdullahs. Abdullah ibn Abbas, yes, that's one of them. Prophet's cousin, all right? Someone else, give me the second one. Abdullah ibn Umar, second one, that's good, exactly. Any third one? No. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, no. Ibn Umar was already mentioned. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. Good, one more. Abdullah ibn Zubayr. These are the four Abdullahs. These four Abdullahs, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, they were hardly teenagers. They were very young. They were very young when he passed away. And they went on to be great scholars of the Ummah. And we know of other stories of companions who were teenagers, the Prophet ﷺ empowered them, or they were young people and the Prophet ﷺ empowered them and made them love him and love the masjid and love Islam. This is what we want. So how can we make our masajid into this? Of course, it's a big question. The first part of it is, let me ask you guys this question. What do you guys think is the most important, what is the most important capital that a masjid has? I'm not talking about its bank account. What's the most important capital that a masjid has? The community, the people, right? That's what makes a masjid a masjid. That's what makes it extremely special. Like, I'll just give you an example. Imagine you have this $100 million facility, amazing, state of the art. But as soon as you walk in, you find the meanest, most arrogant people waiting at the door for you. Who are you? What do you want? What are you about? don't go here, don't go there. Imagine, $100 million facility, state of the art, can't get any better than that. If you get treated horribly at the house of Allah, you going to want to go back to that? Are you going to want to be part of that? That's what made the masjid special during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. We're telling you from Jarid al-Nakhl, we're telling from the date palm trees and the date palm leaves. That's how the masjid was built. The walls of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ were from trunks of date palm trees. It wasn't exactly spectacular in terms of what we have today in terms of building and structure. What makes a masjid special? The people in it. And I'm happy you all said that. It's not some of the people, it's all of the people in it. Sometimes what happens with our masajid is that the reality becomes that you have maybe perhaps 5 people or 10 people who are active in the space, and then you have the 90% or the 95% who are all just spectators, spectators. That's a very toxic reality. It's a very horrible reality to see. The Prophet ﷺ, when he built the masjid, he made it a point that all of the companions participated together in it. And they were actually, it was a very spiritual exercise as they were putting together the walls. Some of them were made from mud, clay, and some of them were from the trunks of trees. And as they were building and putting these slabs of the clay on, in the masjid, they were saying the following: Allahumma la khayra illa khayrul akhirah, faghfir Allahumma lil ansari wal muhajira. They were saying this: Oh Allah, there's no goodness except the goodness of the akhirah. So forgive the ansar and the muhajirin. They were making prayers and dua, and the Prophet ﷺ was alongside them. The Prophet ﷺ was alongside them. What makes a masjid crumble? Let me answer this one. I don't know if it's let me know if you get good questions coming, because sometimes I might get carried away. Let me just mention this point and we'll come to them. What makes a masjid crumble is when it's on the back of a select few. There's a few things we can add to this list. What makes a masjid fall in ruin? When one of them, it's not really something that is owned by the community, that the people don't feel invested in the space. You have an imam who is a jack of all trades doing everything, and then you have maybe a few guys volunteering here and there, and that's it. That's what makes the masjid. Everyone else, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Boop. Let me go outside to the parking lot, right to my car. Maybe I'll talk for a little bit outside, but then besides that, I'm done. That's my relationship with the masjid. That makes a masjid crumble, because what happens? When fulan or fulana or imam fulan or imam fulan goes, what happens? Masjid's gone. Mafi masjid, no more community. Why? Because no one was really part of it. There's no owned. So this is one thing. Another thing that makes masjids crumble is if there is a cliquish reality to it, where, it's all about your ma'arif, right? Favoritism. This is Ibn Fulan, and this is from A'ilat Fulan, Al Fulan, and we're just these families, and I'm the son of so-and-so, and I'm the daughter of so-and-so, mash'arif, we're friends, and anyone who's not part of the clique is sort of an outsider. That makes masajid crumble. And that's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ dismantled before it even existed. With the bond between the muhajirin and the ansar. You know what happened one time in the seerah? What happened was, someone was sent to create problems between the muhajirin and Ansar. They started mentioning some of the battles that happened before Islam. Harb Bu'ath, it was a battle that lasted for over 20 years, over nonsense. Some of the battles in Jahiliyyah, they raged for very long times between these feuding Arab tribes, and they didn't even know why they were fighting. So anyway, this person tried to ignite fitna between them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he came rushing, because they started yelling to each other, Ya lil ansar, Ya lil muhajirin. Everyone started calling over their crew, right? So the Prophet ﷺ said, are you going to make the call of ignorance while I'm among you? أَبِدَعْوَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ وَأَنَا فِيكُمْ. So what makes a masjid crumble? When it's cliquish. Oh, this is an Arab masjid, this is a Desi masjid. Oh, this is a masjid of this category, of that category, and so on and so forth. That is something so far removed from the beauty of the message of the Prophet ﷺ. You see any pictures in this space? You see any pictures of people? You see any ownership title? You see the owner? Who's the owner of this masjid? Who's the owner of the masjid? Who's the owner of the masjid? Allah. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. Sometimes people treat the masjid like it's their baby because they're the founders. This is mine. I'm the owner. Allahu Akbar. But no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. That's what makes the masjid special. And that's what brings people in. That's what the Prophet ﷺ was able to do so magnificently. He made people come together in this space, and He made sure that those toxic things did not stay between them. He made them take ownership of the house of Allah. You find many different roles. The Prophet ﷺ institutionalized the da'wah. You had how many mu'adhins during the time of the Prophet ﷺ? How many? Who notable mu'adhineen? 2, right? Sayyidina who? And Abdullah ibn Maktoum. These are the 2 notable mu'adhins of the Prophet ﷺ. And you had many others who the Prophet ﷺ would put forward to lead salah, sometimes in their local neighborhood, who they would also come with the Prophet ﷺ. Like Sayyidina Mu'adh ibn Jabal. Like he would lead in his local neighborhood, and then he would come and join the Prophet ﷺ for the prayer. The Prophet institutionalized the da'wah. Right, I'll stop there because I'm getting carried away.
So building off to the next question, so what we're hearing is a lot of activism, a lot of people doing their part. The masjid is the people. The masjid is all of us. And one thing that I remember clearly after Ramadan and in the past few months is 2 things. One, we saw a lot of new converts, and most of them, if not all of them here in this masjid, were young brothers, young sisters. I'd say maybe college or late 20s. And the nice thing was that we, at least on the brothers' side, and I'm sure for the sisters the same, at the end of every Isha, you'd see people collect together, you'd see people chat, you'd see people, communicate beyond just the Friday Forum. And that's one of the reasons why, Friday Forum and Community Hub were all created, right, to facilitate this sense of community. So that's definitely very important. It's important for us to volunteer and to help. It's important for the operators, of course, to facilitate less toxic behaviors, less toxic environments, and know to be inclusive. So moving on from that, how do we make the masjid more welcoming? The question after that goes, oftentimes I go to a masjid and notice people only give salam to people they know, and I feel isolated.
Jazakallah khair. For the question, how can you make the masjid feel welcoming? Learn to smile. That's one. Learn to smile. ابتسامتك في وجه أخيك صدقة. Smiling in people's face. Sometimes you might make someone's day a whole lot better if you just smile. Smile, it's good. Life's short. Smile. Life's short. Smile. Be happy. Right? Ask about people. Learn how to talk to people. That's what I mean. Like the masjid, if it remains just about a select few, like Imam Fulan or volunteer Fulan or Fulan or Fulan or مش عارف ايه, and that's it, then we're not going to get anywhere. It's easy to be an armchair critic, right? Just sit back and say, these people in the masjid, all they want is money. And these people in the masjid, all they're about is politics and bureaucracy. This and that. What have you done? What have you done? How many times have you gone to the masjid and made sure to make it a point to get to know people? You know what? When you go to the masjid, you can have multiple intentions. I'm going to the masjid to pray. I'm going to the masjid to help cleanse my heart. I'm going to the masjid to learn something new. I'm going to the masjid so that it might positively influence one of my brothers or one of my sisters. I'm going to the masjid 4 and 4 and 4. Right? These are the reasons that will give us multiple rewards, And again, look, we all have shortcomings, Sometimes we might be praying alongside some of our brothers or some of our sisters, and this might be for years on end, and I don't even know this person's name, let alone know anything about them. So the whole idea is, and you know what, I want to say something to this point. I want to say something. Look, we've been through years of COVID, and before that, since the social media craze, has been intensifying. We started off with, I don't even know what we started off with. I'm not good about the historical timeline of social media. I know that there was something called MySpace at one time. I think that's what it was called. And then we had Facebook, and then we have Twitter, and then we had Instagram, and then you have Snapchat, and then you have TikTok, and I don't know if there's any other stuff, Allahu A'lam. But the whole point is, people in general, Muslim and non-Muslim, are no longer interested in human interaction. They're not really interested in it, right? You want to communicate texts, right? I'm going to post about my life. You know what? My Facebook's going to know, even before my own family members, the new things that are happening in my life. They'll find out when I put my Facebook post, right? That happens with some people, right? So social media has taken over people's lives. It's really taken over. And you know what? It's made people have very weak social skills. It's causing a lot of mental health issues. And we don't know the effects of it because the generation that was born in the age of social media is still very young. The ones, you could say from 2005 onwards, we're going to see the more and more the effects of this stuff come out in the coming years. However, does the masjid still have relevance in this reality? Does the masjid still have relevance? It should, but it's not easy. How can you really get someone to come to the masjid on a weekend night? I want to stop everything I'm doing. I'm going to go drive out in the cold or in the rain or whatever it is to be in this place. It's not easy to convince people to do that anymore. But I think that having human interaction, take a look at this, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. What happens when you shake your brother's hand? What happens when you shake your brother's hand? The Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, what happens when you do this? What happens?
The bad deeds.
That the bad deeds fall off كما يتحات ورق الشجر. Just like the trees of the leaves of the tree fall off, the sins are falling off. Why? Because we need human interaction. We need good people around us. We need positive voices around us. You won't get that in a virtual reality. You won't. In fact, people on social media, ماخذين مجدهم, right? I could just put some fake alias. I'm going to go troll somebody. I'm going to say all these malicious type of things, and I'm going to this and that, مش عارف ايه, and no one's ever going to find out because it's an alias, right? I'm, some fake name, whatever. I don't want to. Think of whatever funny name you want, and then just post whatever you want. You could do this with Facebook. People are doing this with Facebook, by the way, like a lot. Some people have multiple. I don't know how they have the time for that, but like some people have like multiple Facebook accounts. Like one Facebook account is for the people who know them, and then the other Facebook account is for their alternate life, where only very few people know about. Like that's where they do the illicit messaging and stuff like that people shouldn't do. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. But yeah, that's the status.
Barakallah feek. The next question we have is, how do we find the balance of wanting our children around the masjid in order to not see the masjid, empty in a few generations without the disturbances? Do there have to be better systems in place, or how do we react to these children? We had that just tonight. We had a lot of disturbances. How do we balance that?
A lot goes into that. The masjid can't do everything, right? The masjid is as great as we make it, right? The masjid is as great as we make it. If we said that the greatest capital the masjid has is not its investments or its trust funds, it's it's the people that come to it. So then how special am I making this place? That's what I need to ask myself. If I want my kids to come to the masjid, I need to give them good alternatives. They actually need to grow through the space. Yeah, sure, if you tell them there's pizza, I guarantee you're going to get numbers through the roof. We tried it before, right? When we had pizza on these Friday nights, Allahu Akbar, the kids outnumbered the adults, and we just didn't even know where they were coming from. The kids were being just dropped off like it was like it was like a daycare center. Like people come in and they want to do something on their Friday night. Let me just go drop them off at the masjid. Yeah, there's like 200 people there anyway, so then I could just go do whatever I want and I'll come back and pick them up in a few hours, right? Great opportunity. But the point is, pizza is only going to go so far, right? Pizza is only going to go so far. Once they turn 15, 16, pizza doesn't work anymore. Or I don't know, maybe 16, 17, my bad. Maybe then you're going to need to do something else, right? You're going to do fun stuff, some more fun stuff, right? Sleeping over in the masjid. Yeah, kids love i'tikafs. They love i'tikaf. They love to sleep over in the masjid with their friends, right? How long is that going to work? I don't think too many 19, 20, or 21-year-olds are very eager to sleep with their friends in the masjid. They're not really that eager to do that anymore, especially after they get a car. Why on earth do I need to go sleep in some place when I have a car now? I could drive wherever I want and hang out with my friends and just go back home, So it's not about those fun things. Even those fun things could be reals. They could be reals. I'm not saying that those fun things aren't good. Yeah, they're good. You'll reel them in. But if the masjid really isn't changing hearts, then that's where you're going to find that there's going to be this big drop-off. And you know what? We noticed this in our community. By the way, we noticed this. And, it's a very scary reality. Kids, when they're in their teens, they are in the masjid. But once they hit a certain age, khalas, they enter college, it becomes very difficult to get them to stay in the masjid. And then you find this big drop-off. They'll come back later on in life, after they're married and have kids and establish themselves in their career. That's when they'll start coming back to the masjid. That's scary. Where do they go for 20 years? Where do they go for 20 years? I'm not talking about the people here. I know a lot of people in here fit that. But this is like what? 1%? The people who are in the masjid spaces are probably even less than 1%. If you're talking about a few 100,000 Muslims in New Jersey, right? How many of them are regularly within the masjid sphere? How many of them just go to the masjid on Jumu'ah? How many of them go just to the masjid on Eid? How many of them don't even go to the masjid on Eid at all? Right? They're the majority. They are the majority. No, so what I'm trying to say here is, yeah, you need to have a great presence in the masjid. You need to have people that are invested in the space. You need to have things that are fun and interesting to bring people in, but then you need to be able to change their hearts. You need to be able to be relevant and speak to their needs. You can't just, make it something that's pushed on the children, forced on them. You can't really just leave them there without addressing their concerns, their questions. In some of our communities, we're still having debates of whether we should speak in this English or in this language or that language, when the kids are like, we're not speaking about first generation anymore. Speaking about second generation, third generation, some people fourth generation. We have people who have become grandparents who were born and raised in this country. We have people who have become grandparents from the Muslims who immigrated here, who now they're grandparents, their parents immigrated here, they're born and raised. That's what we're talking about, So the relevance is really key. Addressing people's problems, really giving them solutions to their struggles. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek. Building off of that, are there things that happen specifically here at ICPC that, or conversations that happen here at ICPC that were made to facilitate this communal environment, when it was established and currently?
Yeah, we're all, look, we're all trying to, we're all trying to figure out how to do good things. I'll say this. We're all trying to figure out. Anyone who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided to the masjid and guided to Islam and Iman, I think ultimately the intention and the will is to do something good for themselves in this dunya and the akhirah, to leave a positive impact. But how far has the Muslim community gotten in that regard? Not just ICPC, let's make it broader. I think that the Muslim community on a broader scale is going in the right direction. When you look at nationwide, in terms of how there are more young people interested in their Islam, more young people who want to study Islam. There are so many teaching institutes across the country. Manara, you mentioned as one of them, that one's local, Manara College. You have many others that are on a nationwide scale, like Al-Maghrib Institute or Zaytuna College. You have other ones that are, in different localities, whether you're talking about Texas, between Houston and Dallas, or you're talking about Minnesota or other parts, many of these teaching institutes. That shows you a really good sign. When you see young people wanting to be invested in their Islam more and more, that's a really good sign. So when you look micro, you might be pessimistic because you're angry about this event or that not happening or this and that. When you look macro and on a larger scale, ultimately I think that the ummah in general is going in the right direction. When we went from a few decades back of not even having people who sisters who wear hijab, or not even having in some of our Muslim countries, let alone America. Forget about America. I'm not going to mention countries by name, but there were some countries a few decades back, if you saw a young person praying in the masjid, this is very, very strange and bizarre. The masjid was this place for old people. When you retire and you're like in your 60s, no offense to anyone here who's in their 60s or 70, that's when you go to the masjid. When you need to be on the chairs and your back hurts and you can't pray, that's when you go to the masjid. But a young person in the masjid, at one point a few decades back in our Muslim countries, that was something strange. Now, alhamdulillah, to see such a presence in our masajid, is there a lot of work to do? Yeah, there's a lot of work to do. I'll tell you, it's really, really hard. I'm honest with you. It's really, really hard for Muslims to learn to work with each other. It's just, it's just the reality. We have a lot to work on in terms of becoming professional, in terms of, becoming, overcoming some of the diseases of the heart that might come in, and, overcoming pride and arrogance and ostentation and riyah and all that other stuff. It's not easy. But ultimately, are we going in the right direction? I think the answer is yes.
Barakallahu feek. Moving on to questions about volunteering. The first question here is, sometimes I worry I subconsciously do good in the community for the sake of approval rather than for the sake of Allah. How can I be sure about my intentions?
Alhamdulillah, that you look, I'll tell you something that Imam Ghazali said. Imam Ghazali, he taught us profound wisdom when he said the following. He said, طَلَبْنَا الْعِلْمَ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَأَبَى إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ لِلَّهِ. And of course he's saying this, I don't perceive it as his reality because he's one of the greatest imams in our past, but he's teaching us something through it. We sought knowledge for other than Allah, but knowledge refused except to be but for Allah. Meaning sometimes you might do something for the wrong reasons, but if you keep on at it and you're trying to fix yourself and improve yourself along the way, it'll end up leading down the right way. That's why you tell someone, hey, some people, they're on the fence, and the shaitan convinces them of a fatal attitude towards their growth. This person biqatta', right? He prays sometimes, doesn't pray sometimes. He's on the fence. And he says, you know what? I might as well not pray. I'm missing so many prayers anyway, so why pray anyway? Or someone will help him get there and say, I don't even know why you're praying. It's not like Allah's going to accept from you anyway. You're an awful human being. ليش بتصلي؟ ربنا راح يتقبل منك أنت؟ No. تعقلي والديك. So this language is there sometimes, and of course it's coming from a place of foolishness. No, let me do the right thing, and maybe, and there's actually a hadith I read about this recently. The hadith says maybe eventually that'll help change him. So the hadith was about إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. Salah prohibits wrongdoing. So then one of the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ that Fulan prays, but he does a lot of wrongdoing along with that. So the Prophet ﷺ said, سَتَنْهَاهُ صَلَاتُهُ يَوْمًا مَا. One day his salah is going to stop him from doing this. So again, if you're volunteering, please continue volunteering. Because you know what, sometimes people, they stop doing the right thing for a reactionary purpose. The reactionary, right? Why should I do the right thing? This person hurt me. This person offended me. I'm not going to do the right thing because doing the right thing gets you nothing. Being a good person gets you stepped on. That's what some people have this attitude. I got hurt once, twice, and thrice. I'm going to stop doing the right thing. Khalas. I'm not going to be in. Why should I volunteer in the masjid? The people who are running the masjid are 1, 2, 3, 4, ومش عارف إيه كذا. Why should I volunteer in the masjid? They're not worth it. I'm going to just isolate myself and be in a little corner and just focus on me. That's the worst thing the shaitan could convince a person to do. Let me stop doing good things because the people around me aren't very good. If the Prophet ﷺ did that, what would happen? If the Prophet ﷺ did that, we'd never have the message that we had. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Barakallah feek. The next question also related to volunteering. This is something I'm sure a lot of volunteers think and feel. Say you volunteered and were always involved. How do you know when it is enough and a good time? Sorry, I got downvoted. And a good time to leave and focus on yourself for your career. So a lot of volunteers get this feeling of burnout. They're constantly there. They're constantly volunteering, day in and day out, or all of Ramadan, or for an entire year, and then they're gone.
Look, Jazakallah, it's a really good question. It's so critical to understand the following, that the greatest priority in terms of my connection with my Islam is investing in myself, first and foremost. Meaning, building myself up, because if I don't invest in myself, spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, then I'm not going to be able to give much to others. And this is a fatal mistake that people make when they choose to volunteer. You know what? Once I start volunteering, I stop the door of benefiting. I'm not gonna. Now I don't receive anymore. I'm just going to give. Right? I'm in a position of giving others. I'm not benefiting myself. That's the worst thing that a person could do. To deny themselves the potential to grow. So I always try to say this, especially when addressing volunteers. Make sure that the doorway to becoming a good father is being a good person. Invest in becoming a good person, and becoming a good father is going to come after that. Because what do they say? فَاقِدُ الشَّيْءِ لَا يُعْطِيهِ. The doorway to becoming a good mentor to someone who's young is by learning yourself. Investing in yourself and learning. That's the first step. Right? If I don't do that, the one who doesn't have something really can't give it. The one who doesn't have something can't. And you know what? Someone might have something, but you know what? If they invested in themselves a little bit more, they'd have something so much greater. So it's not that everyone has something to offer. Right? But how much am I going to invest myself? That's going to translate to how much good I'm going to do. So anyway, getting back to this question, don't have a transactional relationship with volunteering. Okay, this stage in my life is over. Now I'm going to focus on my career and my schooling and I'm going to move on. No, it's not about that. Giving is a lifelong journey. It's what makes your life special and worthwhile. Once your giving stops, and you start focusing on yourself, that's when your loss begins. Because the Prophet ﷺ's life was so valuable, was because it was a life lived for others. So no, giving doesn't stop. Yeah, you could choose to modify how much and to what, and what do you want to focus on, that's absolutely fine. But don't ever lose yourself in the process. What's so funny?
Too many people are asking me to upvote and do insider trading, and I can't. They want me to vote up or choose certain questions. I have to remain neutral.
Are these like people who have an inside track?
People who have an inside...
you getting text messages?
Yeah. So, this next question is, what's your opinion on people who say that the masjid is a very judgmental space, and what can we do to combat that?
What's my opinion about people who say that the masjid is a judgmental space?
Well, I don't think that's exactly what the question means. I think, what's your opinion on that statement, that the masjid is a judgmental space, and what can we do to respond? So someone maybe is not as involved, comes to me and says, hey, I don't like the masjid, very cliquey, everyone's looking at me sideways. How do I respond to that?
I would say that there's a potential to being a lot of truth, there being a lot of truth behind that statement. Because as we already agreed, the masjid is as good as we make it. The greatest capital a masjid has is the people that come to it. And you know what? We're not talking about one masjid, we're talking about many masajid with this. You know, you're dealing with human beings. If the human beings haven't worked on themselves enough to really embody the prophetic spirit, then that's what you're going to have. Of course, is it possible? All right, let me ask you this. Is it possible to have someone who prays in the first row every single day, but outside the masjid they're a completely lousy human being? Is this possible? Yes or no? Is it possible? Is it possible that you have someone who comes to the masjid every day, but when they go to their business, they cheat people and they lie and they take advantage of others? Is that possible? Yes. Is it possible to have someone in the masjid who appears to be nice and pleasant, but when they go home, they're this monster and there's an abuser who hurts their family and hurts their children? Is that possible? Yes, it's possible, unfortunately. So the masjid is as good as we make it. Is it possible that someone, and this is one of the straw mans that come, like, you know, sometimes people on the fence with hijab or something like that, they'll say, oh, why should I wear hijab? I know people who wear hijab. Not only that, they wear niqab, but they're the biggest gossipers I've ever seen. They're horrible human beings, always talking about people, right? Doesn't that happen? That's a straw man argument, right? Because that doesn't change how beautiful it is, a concept, because you have certain people who do it that are awful. Like that person who's, I'm not speaking about a specific person, but that person who's on a coffee shop or whatever, hanging out, and they, oh, I don't go to the masjid. Why? Oh, they're all a bunch of hypocrites in the masjid. كلهم منافقين. I don't want to go to the masjid. Why should I go to the masjid? Oh, a bunch of hypocrites. Right? Well, why don't you go to the masjid? And maybe you, with 100 others who are like you, will make the hypocrites a little bit less, and the true believers will become a little bit more, right? Let me look at it with that attitude, right? I understand that it's not, no one likes to be judged. Look, I'm not diminishing from this. Like, who wants to come in the masjid? I know that I've heard this from the sisters, complaints from the sisters a lot. Sometimes, one of the sisters would walk in, and she'd get stared down from head to toe. And then some sisters would start gossiping, oh, look what she's wearing. Oh, do you know this sister Fulan? I heard this, and this about her. Oh, and this, and that. And the gossiping and the stories that are created by people who are supposed to be models of faith. You know, it's sad. Well, sad. Why would that happen? No one likes to be judged. No one likes to be criticized. Or you know what? I'll be honest. Sometimes you might even find a little bit of racism in the masjid. Can you, in the masjid, I'm not talking, no one say I'm talking about our masjid, okay? We're talking about masajid, مش عايزين مشاكل. I don't want any problems, all right? The masajid, all right? So can you find racism in masajid? Yeah, yes you can. Oh, you have someone who's new to the masjid, he looks a little bit different, maybe perhaps of a different race or a new convert or something, body looks a certain way with tattoos or مش people like staring out of the corner of their eyes, all right, when is he going to try to do something? Right? When is he going to try to take something? Who's this guy? What is he about? Maybe he's an informant or something like that. Some people have that feeling and that attitude, and that's, of course, it's horrible. It's a tragedy when you have that. No one likes that. But hey, you know what? If I allow my emotional wounds to deny me of doing good things, then I'm going to miss out on a lot of good in life. That's the message I want to get to this person. Yeah, you might be right. Don't stop coming. Because if good people stop coming to the house of Allah, the house of Allah is going to be infested with this other type of rhetoric. Let the good voices keep on coming. It's okay. Bear that emotional wound for a little bit. Grow past it. Become better because of it, and then inshallah Allah will bring you closer to people who are good. People who can help you become better. Allahu A'lam.
Barakallah feek. Every week we get a lot of different marriage-related questions. So first question to you, and then we'll go to that question that's semi-related. When are we getting part 2 of the premarital or the marriage talk with Shaykh Yasser?
So the first part was with Shaykh Yasser.
No, that's my question.
Huh?
That's my question. When are we getting part 2? Because we get every week many questions.
Part 2 with Shaykh Yasser, you mean?
Ideally.
Ideally, inshallah, ya Rabbi. Bidnillah, I'll work on it with him, bidnillah ta'ala.
Inshallah.
But hopefully, I'm hoping to go back to it, and we'll have different parts. Even we'll try to bring Shaykh Tanani on for one time. Inshallah, we'll try to discuss it, you and I, one time. Maybe perhaps we'll try to bring a specialist in the field. Inshallah, we'll have different sessions about it. I haven't set a date for any of these, but I know that's one of the important things that happens through masajid. You know, that's one of the important things that happens through masajid, is that good people get to know each other. And perhaps through those connections, families will start. And that's ideal. That's ideal, to happen through the masjid space as well. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's I think what the question is getting at here. It is increasingly frustrating to how hard it is to meet a guy from the masjid. How can one get over the idea of marriage if it is not met for you right now? So maybe we touch on the beginning section of how we can meet in the masjid, and then the second part of how do we get over the idea of marriage if it's not met.
So look, I think it needs to be understood that unfortunately the subject of marriage is very challenging across the board, inside and outside the masjid. It's something that society as a whole is struggling with. The family institution is not doing very well. It's a struggle for many to get married, and it's a struggle for many others to stay married. With divorce rates through the roof. And you know what? Even those who stay married, it's a struggle to stay happy when married. So these are three different struggles that you could talk about that our community is facing: the struggle to get married, the struggle to stay married, and the struggle to stay happy when married. Right? These are three struggles. And what's the solution to this problem? It is a big problem. I think that we're trying as a community across America to figure this out. Many different, marriage efforts and institutions that are popping out locally and around. In our own masjid, we have the matrimonial services, that effort that's being undergone. And we also have those matchmaking efforts that are done on a personal, private level. There's a lot of challenges to it though. So how can people meet good people, and how can people start marriage life on the right foot? It's something that needs a conversation. It's not something that you could just answer with this is the quick fix. Hey, you know what? I got the secret. I got the answer to this mega problem that the Muslim Ummah is facing. And I'll tell you it in 5 minutes. I wish it worked that way, and I wish it was that easy. I can totally see what I mean about the masjid space. I can totally see how difficult it is if someone lives far away from community and is completely isolated from the Muslim community and from the masjid to get married. That's a big problem. When I choose that for myself and my family, I'm choosing for them, a lot of struggle. So it's very important to be connected with the masjid, because that's the ideal place that eventually and it happens with many, in the right time, under the right circumstance. That's how it happens with many, where good people will meet each other, either through the same masjid or through the masajid network or the Islamic institution networks that there are. Wallahu a'lam. So stay doing your part and stay patient, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you beautiful rizq and facilitate your affairs.
Ameen Rabbil Alameen. We're nearing the end time, so I'll ask a quick one here. Does Shaykh Osamah, that is you, have specific days, times that he is open for walk-in for questions?
Well, I have my Google Voice number. We always had that up here. It's if you don't have it, it's 862-208-3638. 862-208-3638. You could reach out to that. If you call, I won't answer unless you leave a message. I get a lot of calls, and unfortunately sometimes when you leave a message, I might miss that too. Please forgive me. I don't mean to miss your messages, but send a text and I'll try to set a time for you, and that's usually how I do it. I usually receive texts or emails and I'll respond to them. I'll set a time to speak, and that's, but I really don't do walk-ins.
Tamam. All right, can you say the number one more time in case someone wasn't able to get
862-208-3638.
All right, awesome. I'll do, I guess, one or two more questions. We'll see how long this one takes. how can we break the mentality of the Arab mindset about cliques of groups, nationalities, and authority to engage more of the outliers?
How can we break the mindset? So look, it's natural for people to gravitate to others who have the same understanding or the same interests. That doesn't only apply to Arabs, that applies to everybody. But really, how can you break out of the negative mindsets that's very isolationist? I'm just going to isolate myself, and it's all like about me being in my silo, my small group that I'm with. How can you break out of that? By really understanding what Islam's about. You know what? Look at this. When people came to this country as immigrants, Muslim immigrants, the masjid was a place for them to preserve the teachings they learned back home, the culture from back home, maybe even the language from back home. That's how it started off. But what's the masjid's real role? What's my role as a Muslim? The masjid's meant to be a lighthouse that reels people in. I'm meant to be someone who inspires and illuminates wherever I go. And if I really understand the message of my Islam and the role of the masjid, and I start operating like that, then you'll find that it's supposed to bring people in instead of push people out. I'm supposed to bring people in instead of push people out. How do you really break out of those negative mindsets? By really learning what Islam is about. By really, really believing in the masjid, in the message, and treating it more than just being about rituals. A ritualistic mindset. Allahu A'lam.
Barakallahu feek. And one thing I know we wanted to discuss was how do we compete against the new Islamotainment that's online and taking everything online.
The what?
Islamotainment, so infotainment. It's like the new celebrity imams and just watching everything on YouTube or watching all the Instagram reels and taking that as our source of I guess spirituality versus coming here to a masjid. What's the difference? Is it the same? Can I get it all out of just watching things online?
Yeah, look, Jazakallah khair for the question. Look, the answer is multifold. By the way, I like the word Islamotainment.
It's not mine. I think Zayd Abbasi.
Oh, mashallah, he always says nice words. I'm going to add it to my dictionary, inshallah. Islamotainment. Okay. So anyway, the answer to this is multifold. One is, once I start realizing that what I need in my life for my personal growth is more than just about information, it's about human connections, that's when it'll start. And sometimes it takes a lot for that realization to settle in. People are struggling. I talk with a lot of people. I try my best to help people when they come to me. And I'm telling you that circumstance drives people to seek help when they realize that there are a lot of things going wrong in their personal life, sometimes in their emotional state, in their attitude towards things, in their relationships. And all of this is stemming from what? From not having a healthy dose of positive human interaction in life. Islamotainment, as you said it, will never fill that void. Yeah, it's good. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy that we have hundreds of lectures to choose from or thousands of lectures to choose from YouTube. Take advantage of it, listen to it on your way to work or school and on the way back home. But that will never be enough. I need good people around me. I need a support system, right? Now, that's on one end. And then the other end of this is when I start realizing that my passive involvement in religious things needs to end and it needs to become an active involvement, that's when I'll start realizing, all right, you know what, I need to break out of this shell. But part of the problem is if I have this self-centric attitude towards life, it's going to be hard to do this. Someone's blocking your car? Oh. Alright, let me just finish this one point and then I'll let you. Jazakallah khair. Self-centric attitude towards life. That it's just about me, myself, and I'm just going to fixate on me and I'm going to have this passive attitude with religious things. No, if I want to influence people, I need to have an active attitude towards it. I need to go out and be involved in those types of things. So maybe perhaps, maybe perhaps I'll be able to leave a mark on someone's life and I'll find it when I'm in my grave. تفضل. ماشي. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Allahu Akbar. Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. So he makes some really good points. I just want to reiterate them so everyone knows. One of the good things to have when you come to the masjid, or one of the good characteristics to develop, is to become a little bit less selfish. Right? Become a little bit less selfish when you come to the space. What does that mean? All right. That means a lot of things, to be honest. The way that we keep, the bathrooms is one of them. If I'm like leaving this space very disgusting after I left it, it's horrible. If I'm not raising my children to, I'm telling you, there are atrocious things that happen in the brother's bathroom downstairs, like from kids, like, I don't even want to say, but like one has horror stories of like kids like purposefully like urinating on the walls, urinating in the dumpster, flinging stuff across the bathroom, breaking stuff. It is atrocious. It's and this is something that needs to be addressed. This comes from a space of great selfishness. A great selfishness. Same thing with the shoes, same thing with the parking. We find people struggling sometimes on Jumu'ah to find a parking spot, and akhuna ma'arrad, like on purpose, like sideways, taking up two spots. Why does he do this? Well, it's coming from selfishness. Or someone coming to the masjid, everyone's praying and they just want to have this conversation. I'm telling you, this happens. I've gotten so many complaints from sisters about this, and I want to say this and I'll say it now. Many sisters who come to the masjid, they want to learn, they want to listen. Their whole experience gets ruined because al-hajja fulana or fulana, they want to have this conversation that they couldn't have outside of the masjid. If you want to have a conversation with your sister, instead of having it during the middle of the dars or the khutbah or mash'arifeh, call her. Go home, call her, talk for not a half an hour, 1 hour. Talk for 2 hours if you want. If you have a lot of time, talk for 3 hours, kaman. It's okay. Talk brahtik. But if people are trying to benefit and you are just like not just having a conversation in a low voice, but full voice screaming, and people are trying to pray, taqillah, fear Allah. When you bring your kids and there's like 100 people in the masjid, and there's this 1 or 2 kids or 3 kids, I don't want to offend anyone, but sometimes I won't mention a particular salah. Sometimes the kids come to the masjid, and during our prayer they like run a half marathon. You hear all the footsteps, and they're running a half marathon, cycle back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you can't focus during your salah at all. It's a problem. It's coming from a place of great selfishness. When someone really, really understands what seeking Allah's pleasure is about, that person becomes very selfless. It's not about me, myself, and I anymore. You know what? Look at this. The Prophet ﷺ said, even in your smell and your scent, and how you come to the masjid. Look, this is how the Prophet ﷺ teaches us to be a very selfless people and empathetic people, right? من أكل من هذه الشجرة الكريهة فلا يقربن مصلانا. The Prophet ﷺ said, someone who eats from this, you eat garlic, you eat onions, you eat something that has an awful stench to it, don't come to the masjid. And they'll tell you in the books of fiqh that is makruh. And to a certain extent, if it causes real adha, it might even be to the point of haram. Right? Tell that to the person who, brings a garlic sandwich to the masjid and then talks, with their full mouth to everyone around them. Right?
Have you seen that one?
Huh?
Have you seen that one?
I'm just joking. You saw that? That's awful, wallahi. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. That's good. I wish there were more tickets. MashaAllah. You guys heard this? MashaAllah. Someone got a ticket today. Say Alhamdulillah. No, but seriously speaking, MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Matari is one of the people who are regularly volunteering in the masjid outside. And some of the things that you see from people who are coming to worship Allah in the masjid, are very disheartening. And again, look, this should not turn us away from community. There's going to be struggles, we need to overcome them. But hey, when someone is trying to forcefully get into the masjid, and they're willing to fight you about it, in the name of blocking someone's driveway or doing something that's going to cause a lot of harm to people, it's awful, it's sad. Wallahi, like he said, some of our neighbors, they cursed the day that we came to this area. We don't want that. Alhamdulillah, the masjid's trying. We're trying to build good connections with our neighbors, but you can't control people sometimes. You can't control people in their behaviors. You can try to advise and advise and advise, but for some people, the only thing that would work is getting a ticket, getting towed, getting some type of fine or some type of violation written on them. For some people, that's the way it works, right? So this is what we have to deal with. One of the I'll be honest with you, one of the most complicated things about being in a masjid space is that you have to deal with human beings. And human beings are complicated, right? And that should not make us want to run away, but because there's such a great reward in being able to deal with human beings, and learn and grow through that. But at the same time, it's not easy. It's really not easy. Allahu A'lam. Does anyone else want to say something? Any comments, questions? Tfaddal Hajj. Astaghfirullah.
While somebody is praying, this has to be like a pin drop.
Jazakallah khair, Hajj.
There is respect not for the person who is praying, respect for the masjid. If you respect the masjid, you have to act like a respected individual. Treat the masjid like it's the holy place. It is not a place for gossip.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair, Hajj. So the Hajj is saying a very important thing. And actually one of the brothers asked me to say this yesterday, so I'll say it. When people are praying, look, the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that the qari should not disturb the one praying. Imagine the one who's conversing and stuff like that. So, the brother yesterday was very frustrated about the same thing, because after we finished salah, what do we have? It's good to find people, saying salam to each other and talking with each other, but not at the expense of others. It's good to have the kids in the masjid, but not at the expense of others. This is partly the responsibility of the masjid and partly the responsibility of the parents. The masjid needs to make sure to have a good space for them, and this is something that we need to work on. And also, the parents need to also be cognizant and aware of this as well. The brother was complaining that after we finish salah, everyone's clapping each other's hands like this, very loud, and talking ha ha ha, and the people are trying to pray. So this is something that we should be very wary of. And look, in the end of the day, I'm hoping that, these numbers came out to the masjid because you like the masjid and that you love the masjid and the house of Allah. But again, we're growing together in this. None of us has all the answers. We don't have everything figured out. Our masajid, they're not perfect. You know what? We need to share feedback and advice with each other. So if there are things that you didn't get to say and you want to say, or advice that maybe perhaps wasn't read, then please just reach out to us and we'll try our best to correct, modify, and fix. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help better us all, inshaAllah ta'ala. You want to say something before we close? Go ahead.
I feel like a lot of people that feel like the masjid is a judgmental place is because the only time someone else talks to them that they don't know, you're either getting like corrected or criticized, and that naturally gives like a negative, every time you talk to me, so they need to criticize me.
Very good point. Very good point. It would be nice if people talk to each other on a regular basis. So take that advice to heart. Jazakallah khair. Very good point. بارك الله فيكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. العصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.